Glory be to the triune God, dearly beloved ones in Christ. Today we shall be dealing with St. John chapter 14, verses 1 through 6. Jesus says to his disciples, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me." In a very short time, life for the disciples was going to fall in. Their world was about to collapse. At such a time, there was only one thing to do: stubbornly to hold on, to trust in God. There comes a time when we have to believe where we cannot prove and to accept where we cannot understand. If in the darkest hour we believe that somehow there is a purpose in our life, and that purpose is love, even the unbearable becomes bearable, and even in the darkness there is a glimmer of light. Jesus says not only believe in God, he also says believe in me. For Jesus is the proof that God is willing to give us everything that he has to give. That is why he says, believe in me. St. Paul puts it in Romans chapter 8, verse 32. He who did not spare his own son but gave him up for us all, will he not also give us all things with him? If we believe that in Jesus we see the picture of God, then in face of that amazing love, it becomes not easy, but at least possible to accept even what we cannot understand, and in the storms of life to retain a faith that is very serene. Jesus goes on to say, "There are many dwelling places in my Father's house." Certainly we know by Father's house he meant heaven, but what did he mean when he said there were many abiding places, many dwelling places in heaven? The Greek word used is monai, and there are many suggestions. I will give three of those suggestions. First is that the Jews held that in heaven there were different grades of blessedness which would be given to men according to their goodness and their fidelity on earth. In the book of Enoch, it is said, "In the world to come there are many mansions prepared for men, good for good, evil for evil." That picture likens heaven to a vast palace in which there are many rooms, with each assigned a room such as his life has merited. So, many mansions is actually a word picture of an abundance of living accommodations around a central courtyard. It also speaks of the multitude of blessings that await those who enter the kingdom of God. The second suggestion is that a Greek writer, namely Pausanias, he used the word monai to suggest stages upon the way. That is, if that is how to take it here, it means that there are many stages on the way to heaven, and even in heaven there is progress and development in advance. At least some of the earlier Christian thinkers had that belief. For example, Origen said that when a man died, his soul went to some place called paradise, which is still upon earth. There he received teaching and training. When he was worthy and fit, his soul ascended into the air. It then passed through various monai, that is, stages, which the Greeks called spheres and which the Christians called heavens, until finally it reached the heavenly kingdom. That is what we read in Hebrew chapter 4, verse 14, that the writer passed through the heavens. Saint Irenaeus, he speaks of a certain interpretation of this sentence which tells how the seed that is sown produces sometimes 100-fold, sometimes 60-fold, and sometimes 30-fold. There were different yield and therefore different rewards. Some men will be counted worthy to pass all their eternity in the very presence of God. Otherwise, some others will rise to paradise, and some others will become citizens of the city, and so on. Clement of Alexandria, another ancient father, he believed that there were degrees of glory, rewards, and stages in proportion to a man's achievement in holiness in this life. Another attractive thing here is that there is a sense in which the soul shrinks from what might call a static heaven. There is something attractive in the idea of a development which goes on even in the heavenly places. In purely human terms, we sometimes feel that we would be dazzled with too much of splendor suddenly if we are immediately ushered into the very presence of God. We feel that even in heaven, we would need to be purified and helped until we could finally face the greater glory. This is, in pure human terms, we don't know what actually happens in heaven. There is a third suggestion, which is a very simple and very lovely suggestion. That is, there are many abiding places in my Father's house may simply mean that in heaven there is room for all. An earthly house may be overcrowded. An earthly inn must sometimes turn away the weary traveler because its accommodation is full. It is not so with our Father's house. Heaven is as wide as the heart of God, and there is room for all. So Jesus could be saying, don't be afraid. Men may shut their doors upon you, but in heaven you will never be shut out. We will now deal with some other great truths within this passage. First of all, it tells us of the honesty of Jesus. Jesus says, if it were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? No one could ever claim that he had been into Christianity by specious promises or under false pretenses. Jesus told men bluntly that he must bid farewell to comfort. He told them that there will be persecution, there will be hatred, there will be penalties they would have to bear. He told them they have to bear the cross in order to be his follower. So he frankly and honestly told men that they might expect both glory and of pain if they followed him. He was not a leader who tried to bribe men with promises of an easy way, but rather he tried to challenge them into greatness. Secondly, this passage tells us of the function of Jesus. Jesus says, I am going to prepare a place for you. One of the great thoughts of the New Testament is that Jesus goes in front of all of us to follow him. He opens up a way so that we may follow in his steps. One of the great words which is used to describe Jesus in Greek is the word prodromos, Prodromos. The word prodromos is used in two ways in which it will light up the picture within it. In the Roman army, the plural word prodromoi denotes the reconnaissance troops. That is, these troops went ahead of the main body of the army to blaze the trail and to ensure that it was safe for the rest of the troops to follow. There is a second usage to this word, prodromoi, that is, when the great corn ships came into a little pilot boat, it was sent out to guide them along the channel into safe waters. That pilot boat was also called prodromos. It went first to make it safe for others to follow. Beloved ones, this is what exactly Jesus did. He shone the way, He blazed the way to heaven and to God, and we might follow in His steps. Thirdly, He tells us of the ultimate triumph of Himself. He said, I am coming again. The second coming of Jesus is a doctrine which has, to a large extent, dropped out of Christian thinking and preaching. But the curious thing about it is that Christians seem either entirely to disregard it or to think of nothing else. It is true that we cannot tell when it will happen or what will happen. One thing is for sure, history is going somewhere. Without a climax, it would be necessarily incomplete. History must have a consummation, and that consummation will be the triumph of Jesus Christ. And that is His promise that He will come again to welcome His friends. And a fourth point is that Jesus said, where I am, there you will also be. Here, a great truth is put in the simplest way. For the Christian, heaven is where Jesus is. We do not need to speculate on what heaven would look like. It is just enough to know that we will be forever with Him. The best definition is to say that heaven is that state where we will always be with Jesus. Now we will deal with two more verses, that is verses 4 to 6. Again and again, Jesus had told His disciples where He was actually going, but somehow they never understood. He told them He was going to the Father who had sent Him and with whom He was one, He is one, but they still did not understand what was going on. At this moment, the disciples were bewildered men. There was one among them who could never say that he understood what he did not understand. That is our father, Saint Thomas. Saint Thomas was so brave. There are many instances in the Holy Gospel to see that the very bravery of Saint Thomas. But here we see he was far too honest and too much earnest to be satisfied with any vague pious expressions. He is so simple, so innocent a man. He has no show off of any piety. He had to be sure. So he expressed his doubts and his failure to understand. And the wonderful thing is that it was the question of Saint Thomas which provoked one of the greatest things Jesus ever said. Jesus said to Thomas, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The greatest saying to us. But it would be still greater to a Jew who heard it for the first time. Jesus took three of the great basic concepts of Jewish religion and made the tremendous claim that in Him all three found their full realization, that He is the way, the truth, and the life. It was the psalmist's prayer, and there are many other references to see in the Old Testament that the people praying to God to show the way. In Psalm 27 verse 11 we read, teach me thy way, O Lord. The Jews knew much about the way of God in which a man must walk, and Jesus is saying, I am the way. What did He actually mean by saying, I am the way? To simply put it, imagine that a person is asking for direction. He don't know the way to go. And some other person who knows the exact place, he says, take the first to the right and second to the left and then cross the square. You go past the church, take the third on the right, and the road you want is the fourth on the left. See, the chances are that we will be lost before we will get halfway, aren't we? So suppose another person tells us when we ask for the way. Suppose he is saying, come, I will take you there. In that case, the person to us is the way, and we cannot miss it. That is what Jesus does for us. He does not give us the advice and the direction. Not only that, but he rather takes us by hand and leads us. He strengthens us. He guides us personally every day. He does not tell us about the way, but he says he is the way. Now he is telling, I am the truth. In Psalms 86:11 we read, teach me thy way, O Lord, that I may walk in thy truth. Now Jesus says, I am the truth. Many men have told us the truth, but no man ever embodied it. Moral truth cannot be conveyed solely in words, it must be conveyed in example. And that is precisely where the greatest human teacher, Jesus, must fall down. No teacher has ever embodied the truth he taught except Jesus. Many teachers could say, I have taught you the truth. Only Jesus could say, I am the truth. Now, Jesus says, I am the life. The writer of the Proverbs writes in chapter 10, verse 17, he who heeds instructions is on the path to life. In the last analysis, what man is always seeking for is life. No one, said Jesus, comes to the Father except through me. He alone is the way to God. In him alone we see what God is like, and he alone can lead men into God's presence without fear and without shame. And in him we see life. A life with Jesus is life indeed. Let us conclude our today's session with these words. We will continue with verse 7 onwards in the next session.